Good afternoon. I want to talk today about the word consistency, not just the word, but the process of consistency or the attitude of consistency or the definition of consistency. And I'm approaching it having read this book, The Socratic Method by Ward Farnsworth. The subtitle, A Practitioner's Handbook. Farnsworth is a fantastic author. He's written a book on Stoicism that's also for practitioners. But he is a legal scholar. Let me see, read his book, his bio. He's the dean of the University of Texas School of Law. And in addition to this book about Socrates or the Socratic Method and a book about the Stoicism, he's written books about English style, rhetoric, metaphor, and style. They all look kind of like this, so they make a nice shelf display. And the Practicing Stoic book in particular is one that's out here on my desk all the time because in addition to sort of the daily Stoic calendars, things like that, it's a book that I find very useful for journaling prompts or for just morning routine. I would show it to you, except it's in the pile of books on top of which my iPad is resting right now as I film this, and so if I were to move it, this carefully composed shot would fall apart. So when we talk about consistency, there's probably three things that come to mind. The first is, and I'm only going to talk about one of them. The first is consistency of behavior, like a routine. I'm consistent in getting up at the same time every day, blocking off time each day consistently to do things. We hear that all the time. Success on YouTube comes from consistently publishing material, consistency of exercise, small consistent effort, much more reliably successful than working out for 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon. That's not the use of the word that I'm interested in today. Today I want to talk about consistency of thought. And so that brings up the idea, there's the quote that I honestly thought was Mark Twain, but it turns out it's Emerson. I'm going to read it. "The hobgoblin of small minds is a foolish consistency. A great person does not need to think consistently from one day to the next." We have a perverse relation to this idea in our society, right? We criticize politicians who change their mind. I'm old enough to remember John Kerry's presidential campaign, and the moniker that attached to him was as a flip-flopper, because, well, I think in particular because he was very clever at legislative maneuvers, and so would vote for debate on a bill that then he voted against or something like that. But he changed his mind about things, and you know what? I kind of want that. Consistency in thought means a lack of self-reflection because we are receiving new information all the time. And for sure, maybe that information reinforces my existing ideas. But for the most part, ideas and opinions will change with new information, and information is always new. So our opinions about politics or about aesthetics or people, first impressions, these things should change over time. Holding the same idea for 30 years, unless it's a really good one, is probably not a good idea. So let's put that aside. When I talk about consistency, I don't mean glomming onto an idea and then holding it consistently the same way that I hold to a consistent routine. And really, even my routines are consistent serially, right? Like I will I intend or commit to a particular type of routine for 30 days or 90 days, and then reevaluate. And for sure, some bits of the routine will maintain a course over course. I find, for example, that meditating as the first thing that I do after I've gotten out of bed is very good for me. It settles my energy, but it also, my mind has a certain elasticity and openness in the first hour or so after I wake that lends itself to understanding those practices. It's not the only time I practice during the day, but it is the time that I consistently set aside for it. It's good to practice when I'm jittery from or anxious from work or tired at the end of the day. But to make it easier for myself, that stays there. Whether I then write in the mornings or exercise, I find myself changing that. But I don't change it every day. I change it slowly after being consistent for a bit. It's hard to know if I'm changing my mind or if I'm thinking things through, because it's hard to know what our minds are doing. And I think that's a good segue into the Socratic method, because one of the points that Farnsworth makes is that in the dialogues, the outcome of the conversation, right, the definition of justice, or what is courage, what are the questions that come up in the Socratic dialogues are attempts to define these broad behaviors or sets of mind or characteristics to define them. But often the end of the dialogue sees no resolution to that, or it sees a resolution that we now look back on and aren't convinced by it. But I think, and this comes from reading this book and from my own survey of the Plato, the point isn't the outcome, the point is the experience. And what that is, then here, there's a word for that. First, there's a word for that sort of ungrounded feeling that can come at the end of a Socratic dialogue. It's called aporia, where you no longer know what you know. Not only do you not know the answer to the question, but you actually don't know for sure what it means to know something. And that outcome, I think, is the intent of the dialogues, is to create an experience. And in the dialogues, Socrates engages with another person, but what Farnsworth is saying is that there's a Socratic element within our mind, and the more that we can train that to turn our attention onto our own thinking, the closer we'll get to understanding where our poor consistency, foolish consistency resides. You can hear that squeaking. It's my dog with his little squeaky toy, one of the dogs. I keep promising to show pictures. He used to show pictures when they were tiny, wee little puppies. If I remember, I'll move the camera and show you. So this dialogue, this tactic of scrutinizing statements is called the elenchus, E-L-E-N-C-H-U-S, elenchus. And it refers specifically to Socrates challenging the consistency of what you are saying. So very rarely does Socrates just come out and say, you are wrong. His approach is to take a statement that his dialogue partner, would that be your dialoguee? Let's call it that. The dialoguee has made a statement. Courage is perseverance. And then Socrates will say, well, what if I continue to take action and it is a wicked action, or it is an action that is harmful? Well, then the perseverance aspect that I would say, well, that isn't courage, is it? No, okay. All right, so courage equals perseverance. Except, well, here you've just said perseverance isn't courage. So now you're being inconstant in the moment. It's a vertical inconstancy. And that's what Socrates is trying to get to. And sometimes it's a one or two sentence back and forth, and sometimes it's a very long, detailed exposition, disquisition on an idea. But the goal is for Socrates to take a statement and have you, his dialoguee, consider it from different aspects. And if any of those aspects contradict the original statement, well, then they cannot both be true. So let's arrive at a new baseline. Let's arrive at a new true statement. And then the process can continue on from there. And what typically happens is that the process can always continue, because there's very few statements where you can clearly and without any doubt define exactly what you meant. And the end state of that process, where the rug is constantly being pulled out from underneath you whenever you make a statement, is aporia. And it is a positive statement, a positive state, because it is the state that allows you to realize that the nature of knowing, the nature of the working of the mind, is the subject of scrutiny. It is a worthy subject of scrutiny. And that these broader questions about what is virtue and what is a good life, and is it good to be virtuous even if no one knows that you're being virtuous, all of the questions that kick off the Republic, but then also lead to the apology on Socrates the night of his execution, is consistent. It's unchanging in his statement that he knows nothing. Right? So I think that's probably good for now. This is a fantastic book, Ward Farnsworth. Take a look for any of his books. The books on the English language are excellent to learn about grammar and syntax, but more than that, they are an experience in the wonder of the English language. And much like the Socratic aporia, having read them, I don't know that I know any better about rhetoric or syntax, but I certainly have an appreciation of the beauty of language that is seeing me in good stead. So keep your wits about you, and if you have any questions, comments, drop them in the comment bit below here, and thumbs up, like, subscribe, etc.